Hey guys, so I'm just touching base as we are coming to the end of Act 1 of Hamlet. I know some of you said you are struggling with reading the text, particularly scenes 2 and 3 came up a lot, particularly scene 3. It seems like everybody's struggling with scene 3, which is fine. That one's kind of an oddball out for the rest of them. But keep in mind we will be skipping a few scenes, and that's not because those aren't important, but just to kind of save some time. They are less important to the play than other scenes. So, for example, anytime we skip a scene like we did with scene 1 of Act 1, I'll give you a general explanation on what goes on. But generally the scenes are fairly short, and they are not super important to the content of the text. So this is a little difficult to see right here, but I will be posting a more clear picture of it on Google Classroom as well with this video. So I'm going to make a little chart here. I know you can't see this, but this is Hamlet Act 1. I broke every scene down that we read, so the first 4 scenes will be scene 2, 3, 4, and 5. I have them different colors for each scene. They are labeled by scene. And I cover just a couple of important pieces for each thing. So, for example, for this first scene, scene 2, I put the location, which we know this is in the court. This is in the hall where everybody's meeting. We have major characters here that we are introduced to, including King Claudius, Queen Gertrude, Hamlet, and Horatio. So, King Claudius was actually Hamlet's uncle. It was Hamlet Sr.'s brother. And when he died, he ascended the throne over Hamlet. I'm not really sure why that is. There's very complex rules on who was supposed to be next or heir to the throne. In this particular case, we are in Denmark. So kind of keep that in mind. Even though it is English literature, it is set in Denmark. So if they say something about Danish people, they're talking about the people of Denmark. The king and queen have just gotten married. Queen Gertrude is, in fact, Hamlet's mom. They get married very quickly after Hamlet Sr. has died. And Hamlet is really not feeling it. So, it's been less than 2 months since his father's passed away, and his mother has already remarried another man. Not only just any man, but it was actually her brother-in-law, and Hamlet finds this very, very offensive. He feels like people have not mourned his father enough. So we're introduced to Claudius and Gertrude, where they're kind of talking to Hamlet about why he's behaving the way he is. And of course, as reasonable people, we understand that Hamlet's upset because his father has passed away. And he's very upset. He's mourning the loss of his father, whereas no one else seems to understand that he's mourning his father. So the king and queen are talking to him, and Claudius essentially says a series of things, which include, this isn't masculine, you can't keep living this way, everyone has a father who's died, that's just the natural order of things, you shouldn't be upset, you're a prince, be a man, this is not your religion. He gives all these really negative reasons and talks to Hamlet very negatively about why he should not be mourning the death of his father anymore, that he needs to get over it. If you've ever encountered anybody who has been experiencing mourning, that's not how it works. You just don't tell them, hey, snap out of it, and they feel better. That's not how it works. So by them telling Hamlet this, it's not actually benefiting him. It's essentially just making him very angry and frustrated. And to be honest, I think I would feel the same way. So Hamlet and Claudius are having that conversation. But on top of that, not only are they having that conversation, they have an additional conversation where Gertrude says, please, Hamlet, do not go back to Wittenberg. Don't go back to college. I'd prefer you to stay here. And Claudius says, me too, as the next heir to the throne, we would like you to stay here rather than leaving. And Hamlet agrees to stay. So there's 2 primary conversations you should be keeping track of there. And we are actually put into our first soliloquy not long after that conversation. Pardon me 2 seconds. Let me grab my book. We are looking at that soliloquy. I'll go ahead and refresh your memory and read it to you. I believe that is in scene 2, if I'm not mistaken. Yes. So, it is in scene 2. It's towards the middle of the scene, if I remember correctly. On the textbook version that I have, it starts on line 129. It may be different line numbers for you. You may not have line numbers. But the sonnet says, or the stage directions tell us that everyone but Hamlet leaves. And that is a really good indicator that a soliloquy is about to take place. And remember that you should have looked up the definition of a soliloquy. And typically their purpose is to share particular feelings for the character. Because, guys, they didn't have things like voiceovers like we use today in movies, for example. The character didn't just look at the audience and say, and, like, you didn't telepathically read their mind that this is what they were thinking. So they had to actually tell you. So they would look at the audience or share with the audience their feelings about a particular situation. And we're about to get Hamlet's feelings for the first time in the play that's not in the middle of a conversation with his mother and stepfather. So it says, "Oh, that this too sullied flesh would melt, thaw, and resolve itself into a dew, or that the everlasting had not fixed his cannon against self-slaughter." So these first 4 lines are really saying that Hamlet, he's like, I'm like flesh that's melting, I'm withering away, I've thawed out, I'm not good anymore. He's like, I'm not okay. I'm not okay at all. And if God didn't put himself against self-slaughter being suicide, maybe I would have attempted. And it says, "Oh, God, how weary, stale, flat, and unprofitable seems to me all the uses of this world." So he literally finds no use for the world. Nothing in it entertains him, makes him feel better. He just feels like, for lack of a better word, poop, He does not feel good at all. He's mourning his dad's death. He misses his father. And his dad kind of died all of a sudden, when we're going to find out why here in a couple of scenes. But it does say, "Fie on it, ah, fie. 'Tis an unweeded garden that grows to a seed. Things rank and gross in nature possess it merely. That it should not come to this, but 2 months dead, nay, not so much, not 2. So excellent a king that was to this Hyperion to a satyr." So he starts off kind of saying, I can't believe it's been 2 months. He's like, not even 2 months, and I still feel just as bad. And then he really gets very angry towards a particular character, and he said, how could this person pick, someone who looks like the Philoctetes goat man from a Hercules over this godlike man who was my father? And of course, if you put the, fill in the blanks there, he's talking about his mother. And he said, how could my mom pick this trash being, Claudius, when she had my father who was so great and so amazing? And he continues by saying, so loving to my mother that he might not beteem the winds of heaven visit her face too roughly. Heaven and earth must I remember? Why, she would hang on him as if increase of appetite had grown by what it fed on. So he's like, how could my mother do this? Why do I have to remember it? My father wouldn't even let the wind brush her cheek too harshly, let alone anything Claudius would do for her. And he's like, it's almost, she used to hang on my father's, like, every word, every action. Like, the more she hung out with him, the more she wanted to be with him. And then he continues by saying, and yet within a month, let me not think on it. Frailty, thy name is woman. So he says, I can't even think about it anymore. It makes me sick. And then he calls his mom weak. He says, frailty, thy name is woman. He's saying all women are weak. And the reason she has done all this bad stuff is because she's weak. A little month or ere those shoes were old, with which she followed my poor father's body, like Niobe all tears. Why she, even she, O God, A beast that once discourse of reason would have mourned longer, married with my uncle, my father's brother, but no more like my father than I to Hercules. So he's like, she didn't even let her shoes get worn out before a month passed and she got with Claudius. And again, he's very upset about this timeline. It may not have been so bad over the course of time, but it has happened so quickly that he's very upset with the way things have progressed so quickly. And he says, my mother, like, she should have been like Niobe, this Greek goddess. I believe it was Greek. Yes. A Greek mythological creature who continued weeping for her slaughtered children even after she was turned to stone. So she's like, I expect her to do this, but instead she didn't mourn hardly at all. She married my uncle instead, and he's not even as great as my father was. Like, he's a step down. And he's like, that's like saying I'm Hercules. He's like, that's just not true. It's not a fair comparison. It says, within a month, ere yet the salt of most unrighteous tears had left the flushing in her gullied eyes, she married. O most wicked speed to post with such dexterity to incestuous sheets. So even though his mother and his uncle are not biologically related, he still refers to this as incest. He still sees it as like this line that shouldn't have been crossed, that she's doing something very naturally wrong by marrying Claudius. And especially, again, so quickly. He feels like the tears that she shed for his father were fake because she's gotten married so quickly. And then he finishes up the soliloquy by saying, it is not, nor cannot come to good, but break my heart, for I must hold my tongue. So first he says, this can't come in, nothing good can come of this. It's been bad, it's getting worse, and it will only get worse. And then he ends off, he's like, I must, as much as I hate all of this, I have to kind of keep it to myself. Because, again, it's kind of not seen as his place to go against the wish of the king and the queen. Because while he is important to the kingdom, he is not actually king. So if he does something out of line, he can be removed from the kingdom. Very bad things can happen to Hamlet if he doesn't kind of keep things to himself. And we're going to see the consequences of some of both Hamlet and Claudius's actions throughout the play. So kind of keep those in mind as we continue. So we have our first soliloquy, Hamlet sharing his opinions about all the things that have been told to us so far. They finish out the scene, Horatio and Hamlet are talking, and Hamlet's talking to his friend about how, miserable he feels, and he tells Horatio, I didn't realize you were here, I'm happy to see you, here for he was like, why are you here? And he's like, I'm here for your father's funeral. And he says, oh, don't you mean my mother's wedding? And he's being really snippy and sarcastic at this point, kind of being like, yeah, they happened on the same day, didn't they? Like, they might as well have been back to back. Like, you went to the funeral in the morning and the wedding in the evening. And again, he's kind of like picking fun at and like very upset by the time frame. This is happening so quickly that he does not feel like his mother has done the right thing, that they have like honored his father in the proper way. And then Horatio comes in and he's like, hey, we actually came to talk to you. We saw a ghost, and the ghost looks just like your father. And Hamlet, of course, is freaking out. He's like, I want to know everything. I want to go see them. Horatio says, look, this is legit. I saw the ghost myself. This is what I noticed. We need to go see him. And, of course, they make a plan to go see this ghost. And that's essentially what happens over the course of the rest of the scene. And at the end, of course, that is the game plan for them to all meet up that night between 11 and 12 at the guard post to go see this ghost and potentially talk to him. Because we see the ghost, and Horatio sees the ghost in scene 1, which, again, we skipped over. But essentially, that's all that really takes place in that scene. Moving into scene 3, again, which seems to be the one that troubles everyone most. Sorry, excuse me. In scene 3, Well, actually, let me go over the summary for this first. So, I have the major characters down here, and then I have that the king and queen get married. Hamlet's not happy about the marriage. Dad is dead. There's little mourning for him. The ghost is in armor, appears in armor. Plan to see the ghost, and Hamlet is concerned about the way the ghost is dressed in armor. When we move into scene 3, we're now in Polonius's room. Polonius is a lord in the castle. He's somebody who follows Claudius's rules and stuff, but he's kind of like upper class, but he's not a royalty. The major characters in this scene are Ophelia, Laertes, who are brother and sister, and Polonius, their father. And generally, most of this scene is actually just different male characters giving advice to a woman. So, initially the scene starts out, Laertes is returning back to France to go back to school. He asked the king for permission to do so in the previous scene. It was a very small part, that's why we didn't really mention it. But he is now officially going back to France. His father isn't there yet, but his sister is, and he says, I'm going to miss you. Please make sure you write. And she's like, of course I will. And he's like, oh, by the way, I wanted to talk to you about Hamlet. And she's like, okay. So he's like, I have some advice for you. And he gives her a series of kind of warnings in a way. And he says, keep in mind that Hamlet has a lot of responsibilities. And he is going to be king. His responsibility is always going to be to that job, whether he likes it or not. So you need to be really careful because he may love you. He may mean every bit of the things he tells you, but he may, in the long run, not be able to own up to those feelings because his responsibility and his number one will always have to be the kingdom. And if it's not, he's a bad king. So he's basically saying you need to be careful about what you do and do not allow Hamlet to do with you. Because remember, a woman at this time had to be very careful of her sexual reputation. Because if she wasn't, she could theoretically be disowned. She can dishonor her family. She can have a difficult time getting married in the future. And marriages were seen as alliances at this time. This was a way for women to move up in the social status. This was a way for women to make money for their family because they couldn't really work, especially if they were seen as higher class women. So this becomes a very big issue because Laertes basically says if you mess up, what are you going to do? There's going to be nothing you can do. So you need to be very careful. And he really says you need to be afraid. You need to be afraid to lose your virginity. You need to be afraid of what Hamlet can take from you or force from you. Because again, he is the king, even if he means it, even if he's a good-natured guy, it can still cause problems for you in the long run. And then Laertes and Polonius comes in and talks to Laertes, and tells him, hey, I have some advice for you before you leave. And so his father goes through normal parent advice, if you get in a fight, try not to get in a fight, but if you get in a fight, handle your business. If you should always think before you speak, you should think before you act, you should make sure that you don't make yourself a target in any way, whether that's with your words or your reputation or your money. You should have a good reputation. He said don't lend money to people. Don't borrow money from people because if you lend money, you don't get it back. You can lose friends. If you borrow money and can't pay it back, that's damaging to your reputation. And it all comes back to reputation. And it's very important for men to have a good reputation at this time because you can't do any business. You can't move up in the world. You can't do anything positive for yourself if you have a bad reputation. So Polonius is saying, hey, you need to be careful about your reputation while you're away, and more importantly, think about how that reflects not only on me or you, but on me as well. And you'll notice that Polonius gets very I-centered throughout the rest of the text. He's very, very interested in his reputation and what happens to him more so than the actual benefits to his children. Moving forward, Laertes actually leaves, and then Polonius gets a little kind of like hint that Ophelia and Laertes had been talking about the situation with Hamlet. And literally, Polonius is like the worst, like, dad for a girl ever. I mean, maybe at this time he wasn't bad, but if my dad talked to me this way, we'd have problems. So he essentially tells her, look, assume you're an idiot. Pretend you're like a baby, and I am here to guide you and make sure that you're doing the right thing. He says, you're spending way too much time with Hamlet. You're making yourself way too available. You need to stop because it's going to cause problems to my reputation. Not even worried about her reputation at this point. And essentially at the end of the text, he just says, okay, or she says, okay, Dad, I won't hang out with him anymore. I'll, do what you say. I'll obey you. She's very obedient. So literally he tells her, all these bad things that can happen, and as does Laertes, and he calls her basically an idiot. He treats her like she's incompetent or immature or incapable of understanding. So just kind of keep that in mind, that he's very negative towards her, but she also kind of fits into that very stereotypical role when it comes to that father-daughter role. But she's a little bit more comfortable with Laertes, and she does actually speak a little bit more outward and boldly when Laertes is there and she's speaking with him. So there's a little bit of a difference there. But at the end of the scene, essentially it comes to Laertes and Ophelia are discussing the issues with Hamlet. Hamlet can't love her. She must be fearful of him or cautious around him. And then finally Polonius gives advice to both Laertes and Ophelia agrees to obey her father. Moving into scene 4. Scene 4 is where they meet the ghost. Sorry about that, guys. Scene 4 is when they actually meet the ghost and talk to the ghost. Oh, wait, no, I lied. Sorry. Scene 4 is when they go to meet the ghost. They're on the platform, as we have here. Location, platform at the castle. Major characters that are here are Hamlet, Horatio, and Marcellus, which end up being the same characters here in scene 5 as well, plus the ghost. So, in scene 4, Horatio and Hamlet are talking about the king and how the king's just having these parties and being like a really bad leader. And he uses this particular line that's pretty famous when it comes to Hamlet. It says, something is rotten in the state of Denmark. So he's talking about all these negative things that Claudius is doing. And Hamlet sees the ghost and he says, you look just like my father, but I'm concerned. Are you an evil ghost? Are you a good ghost? Like, why are you here? Why are you in armor? He has so many questions, and he's not really able to determine what the motives for the ghost are, and that concerns him. But he continues to try to talk to the ghost, but the ghost will not speak. But the ghost keeps trying to pull him away from Horatio and Marcellus and talk to him privately. And at first, they're like, look, what if this is an evil ghost? What if he's trying to harm you? And Hamlet's like, well, that's a risk I'm willing to take. And they try to hold him back. Literally, Marcellus and Horatio try to hold Hamlet back from going to this ghost. And Hamlet literally tells them, if you don't get your hands off of me, I will make you a ghost. He literally threatens to kill these people who are trying to protect him. And so, of course, they let him go with the ghost, but then they end up following behind. So essentially what we have here so far, because we finished the scene, but we were finishing up our chart when we got caught by the bell today. So I will be finishing up this chart with your in-person classmates for scene 4 and 5. So for the location, or we finished 4, excuse me, we need to work on 5. That was my bad. So for the summary, we have that the ghost appears, Hamlet tries to follow the ghost, is held back and threatens his friends. Hamlet follows the ghost, and the friends attempt to follow him. I'll make a separate video for scene 5, just because I want to get a little bit more into detail, especially as we move into Act 2. We will only be reading Act 2, Scene 2. There's only 2 scenes in Act 2, so there's 1 and 2. We will only be reading 2. 2 is a little bit longer, so it'll take you a good bit of time, but we will be primarily focusing on Scene 2 next week. So let me know if there are any additional questions. I'd be happy to help. I am going to, again, make a second video that's going to add some information on Scene 5 and moving into Act 2. Again, I know I say it all the time, but please let me know if you have any questions. I'd be happy to help. I don't get a lot of questions, and I know some of you are still pretty behind. I really am here to help, guys, and I am making these videos to help and kind of ease some of that strain. I know it's difficult, but if you were in here, we would all do it together, but we're not here, and we can't do really synchronous learning, so we're doing asynchronous learning, and this is one of the ways we do that. So let me know how I can help. I'd be happy to help. I just don't get a lot of questions, so I don't know exactly what you need me for. So I'm doing the best I can, but I need your help, especially with those bell works, guys. That's a way for me to check in with you on a daily basis. I know I don't always get back to the questions as soon as I possibly can, but I do, I try to get back to them as soon as I can, but I know it's not always as soon as it needs to be. But as always, I'm here. Let me know. Alright, guys. Be good. Look for that second video. Alright? See ya.